Ladies and gentlemen, FIDE just made one of the biggest changes to the game yet, and it has to do with the rating system and what I'm calling their new anti-farming rule. So, this is an article released September 29th, 2025, so I'm recording this literally a couple hours after this has come out. The FIDE Council approves targeted amendment to rating regulations. So I'm going to quickly read the post and then we'll talk about its implications, because it's got implications up and down the rating ladder, and we have to talk about Hikaru Nakamura as well. So, FIDE Ratings, FIDEratings.com. The FIDE Council has approved the amendments to the rating regulations effective as of the 1st of October 2025, following the proposal from the Qualification Commission. Lots of technical jargon there, or at least for me. It's effective the 1st of October, so when the new ratings come out, remember, FIDE ratings are ratified or made official monthly. You can check the live ratings, but they're only official on the 1st of every month. This amendment is designed to ensure the fairness and integrity of the FIDE rating system and provide a level playing field for all top-rated players. The change will apply to players rated 2650 and above, and will affect approximately 70 top-rated Grandmasters. So only 70 players in the world currently this will affect. The amendment addresses the application of the 400-point rule. The rule stated that a difference in rating of more than 400 points shall be accounted for rating purposes as if it were 400 points. So if it was 450 or 500 or 600 rating points or whatever, it was counted as 400s. So if a 2700 played a 2100, they said instead of the 600 points, it's only a 400 point difference, which meant if the 2700 won, they would get the 0.8 rating points. That's changing. There are now no restrictions of how many times it can be applied during a single tournament. We discussed that recently with Hikaru's video. The current wording in the FIDE regulations will change to the following, given here in bold. So, 8.3.1, for each game played against a rated player, determine the difference in rating between the player and their opponent, D. A difference in rating of more than 400 points shall be counted for rating purposes as though it were a difference of 400 points for players rated below 2650. For players rated 2650 and above, the difference between ratings shall be used in all cases. The accuracy of ratings and competitive fairness are paramount for chess. This amendment ensures that rating adjustments at the highest level accurately reflect a player's performance against a pool of statistically equal opponents, safeguarding professional standards set by FIDE. Cool. I think. Are we all on the same page? Let's now turn this all off and we'll just have the graphic here. So what does this mean? Well, to use a broad example, if a player rated 2649 plays a 2100, so a rating difference of about 450 points, it will only be counted as a difference of 400 points, meaning they will get that 0.8 should they win. But if they play someone like 2000, 1900, 1800, it's still only the 400 points. If a player that is 2651 plays the same guy, they're taking the actual difference. So the actual difference in this case would be 450 points, 500 points, or 600 points, meaning that they gain less elo for the win and they lose more if they draw or they lose. Now, there are some thoughts about this and we need to discuss all of them and their implications, right? So I'm just going to pull up my notes here quickly. I have made a couple of notes. So there are some direct implications, right? Number one, there is greater risk for the top players, 2650 plus, so approaching your super GM level, huge risks for them now, because beating a much weaker opponent gives them almost no rating gain. Think about this, right? If you only gained 0.8 for a player 400 points, what happens if a 2800 plays a 2000? 2000 is not bad at chess. They can be difficult to beat, and they could hold you to a draw, which means you will lose a lot of rating. And that ties into like point 2 there, but drawing or losing against them gives you much larger rating loss, because 400 points is something, but if it's 600 points or 800 points, you are losing much more. This makes open tournaments, where you just pitch up and you don't know who you're going to be playing against, huge risks, huge flight risks for top rated players, because there are so much wide rating ranges that you could play. You could play 2500, you could play 2000, you could play an 1800, you could play 2700. Why would you do that? If you are obsessed with your rating and you're not just playing for the fun of it, why would you go to these opens now? So this is going to push them, as we tie into point 2 here in my notes. 2650 players, they're gonna avoid opens at all costs, like they're the plague. They're gonna go for these closed events like Tata Steel and Norway Chess and events like that, where they know who they're gonna play. The rating pool will be contained. So I need to take some water. The rating pool will be contained to 2650 rated players, 2700s or something like that. And this is going to shrink the cool interactions that we get between the top GMs in the world and IMs or lower rated GMs. We're not going to get that anymore. We might still get it, but it'll be less common, because, again, why would these super GMs who rely on these ratings to get invited to tournaments and to qualify for tournaments, and it is a little bit of an ego thing, why would they go for the opens when they are going to lose much more? Yes, they can gain. Of course they can gain in opens, but it is a lot harder if you mess up. Point number 3, though, the ratings will be much more accurate, because the new system reflects the true probability gap between, say, a 2700 rated player and a 2100 rated player, rather than kind of compressing it, saying actually the 2100 player is a 2300 player, or the 2700 rated player is a 2500 rated player, and you shrink that gap to only 400 points. Now, by allowing these huge gaps and the marginal changes in ELO, it's a true reflection of the winning probability. And it prevents players from protecting their rating or farming. This probably would have been called the anti-farming rule. This is why I'm calling it that. Because now you cannot just sit and play 1800s as a 2700 rated player. That 900 point difference, you are gaining next to nothing. You're gaining effectively nothing. So you can't just sit on your rating. You can't artificially inflate it. And this will get to our kind of thing now about players rising up the ranks. You can't just protect your rating by playing lower rated opponents. You can't just play random opens against nobodies like the Louisiana State Championship or the Michigan State Championship or any other random event that Hikaru is probably going to go play. I'm not targeting Hikaru, but using him as an example. You can't just protect your rating. But what impact does this have on some of the rising stars? Well, if they're below 2650, some of the younger prodigies and stuff, they still benefit from the 400 point rule. They still benefit from that. They can get it several times in the tournament, so their rating can go up. It's only once you get to 2651 that it cuts off, which means their rating is at a lower risk, so they can still play with that ambition, and they're benefiting it when they're playing the very strong GMs, like a 2400 player who's trying to gain ratings to become an IM or a GM. Playing a 2700 or 2800 rated player, you've got next to nothing to lose because of the 400 point difference. They've got a lot to lose, so you could even see some more upsets when these two combatants do actually face off against each other. And this will make it slightly easier for those 2400 to 2550 players to gain rating against their elite opponents. Point 5, I suppose, there's some rating inflation or deflation considerations. This may slow down how quickly you gain rating, in the very top, since the big rating gains will kind of be eliminated a bit. You would imagine. We'll see. We'll have to see how this works in practice, of course. All these points could be null and void. But you would imagine that once you get past 2650, your rating will slow down and you will ascend a bit slower. I think that's also addressing kind of what Anish Giri said, where he's like, we don't really have a top 10. We've got like a top 5, and then kind of 6 to 20 just interchange the whole time. Yeah. My final point, and just a thing for discussion, I'd like to get your thoughts on it. Elite players that hover between 2650 and 2700, right? Hans Niemann's an example, Linnea Dominguez Perez probably. Some of these players are like between 2650 and 2700. How are they going to grow their ratings, right? Because they're probably not good enough to gain rating at the expense of the ultra elite. So, your Fabiano Caruanas, your Anish Giris, Magnus Carlsen and Hikaru when they do actually play. Maybe Gukesh, because he's in a bit of bad form. But unless you come up against a player in bad form, how do you really gain that rating? When you come up against other players that are as good and not better, and when the players below you, you're not gaining the full advantage of playing them. So the bottom line is this, right? The winners are FIDE, because their ratings are more accurate, and the ambitious sub 2650 GMs and IMs. The losers are everybody 2650 and a plus. I mean, you could argue maybe it's only that 2650 to 2700 that we just spoke about. But why would they now play in opens, in national leagues, like the South African Open Chess Championship? Why would our top players now come to that? Because they're just setting themselves up for huge losses of ratings. Their rating now has a far greater downside than upside. The big picture, right? This rule pushes the ecosystem, I think, towards the segregation of the elite and the non-elite tournaments, keeping the rating pool kind of self-contained and statistically stable. Those are just some fancy words there. I think we're going to see, potentially, in the future, if this rule continues and it is applied to its fullest effect, we're going to see a lot more elite closed tournaments, because that's where these guys have to play, and non-elite tournaments, if that makes sense. So your opens and stuff, they're going to struggle to get these big guys in, unless they offer huge incentives. If I am one of the top 10 players in the world, and I am trying to qualify for candidates, or I'm trying to get noticed and picked for the ultra elite and prestigious closed events, Tata Steel, Norway Chess, etc., etc., or I'm trying to qualify to the candidates, and having a bigger rating is going to help. Maybe I'm pursuing the rating spot. Maybe I'm just looking to get better draws in stuff like the World Cup or the Grand Swiss. Why would I play that open? Why would I go to some random open in Iceland, or I was thinking of Reykjavik there, or some open in Italy or something? Why would I go play this when I can sit? Me and my mate, we can organize a FIDE rated tournament, a closed tournament. I can play in these like GM norm tournaments where I can play against players who are trying to become GMs, and I can gain a little bit of rating, and I'm playing the required games and I'm active. I think this is gonna hurt some of these non-elite tournaments, because I don't think they'll be able to get the caliber of players in. And if you don't get those players in, then the other players won't want to come because the level will be too low. Maybe that's just speculation. In terms of Hikaru Nakamura, we're going to end with this. In terms of Hikaru Nakamura, his quest for the rating spot, he's almost done. He needs like 11 games, and probably even if he loses some rating, he will still get the rating spot unless he loses a tremendous amount. I don't think he starts a tournament in the next few days, and even if he does, it has to end before October 1st. Otherwise, it gets rated in the October after this rule comes out. It's going to be very interesting to see if he is still going to play, because he probably has to play about 2 more tournaments. unless he finds one really long one with like 11 games. But what he's played so far has been like 5 to 9 games kind of thing. Which tournaments does he pick? Because I think the World Cup player list is almost done. But he could play that, and he might get enough games. He might get enough games and then qualify. So he could play the World Cup. I don't think he will. I really don't think he will. But it'll be very interesting to see those tournaments and those games that he does play, if this comes into his thinking. Because if he does the Louisiana State Championship again, and he comes up against a 2,000 rated player, it is a 816 point difference. And 2,000 is not as good as 2,800. Let's hold our hands up, is not as good. But chess is a hard game to win. And if that player just plays perfectly, if they get a dull opening and Hikaru can't find a breakthrough and he holds him to a draw, that is going to set him back a lot of rating. That could be 10 rating points potentially gone with that 800 point difference. 10 rating points gone for a draw. What would happen if he lost? How much rating would he lose then? So Hikaru's journey just got a little bit more interesting, I think. But let me know what you think in the comments below.